Another employment law that's certainly worth discussing is the Americans with Disabilities Act. As the title of the law implies, this law protects people who are quote-unquote disabled from being discriminated against in employment. One of the most important considerations in the Americans with Disabilities Act is whether or not a person's disabled. Now, importantly, the ADA was amended effective January 1st, 2009, which broadened the definition of disability considerably, so that many, many, many more Americans are covered by this law than they were before. Now, one interesting thing about the disability definition under the ADA is that you can be covered if your employer perceives you as being disabled, even if you're not actually disabled. Due to recent amendments to the Americans with Disabilities Act, we are able now to identify some conditions that in the overwhelming majority of time are going to be considered disabilities, such as cancer. Virtually all forms of cancer are going to be determined to be disabilities. Similarly, mental health disorders like bipolar disorder or major depression, HIV/AIDS, these sort of major conditions are going to be pretty routinely found by the courts to be disabling because of the change in the Americans with Disabilities Act. Now, the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits employers from discriminating against employees in their terms and conditions of employment, which encompasses, for example, personnel type decisions, promotions, demotions, transfers that involve a substantial reduction in responsibilities, pay decisions, things of that nature. The ADA also requires employers to reasonably accommodate individuals with a disability, which basically means that if there is some accommodation that can be made in the workplace to allow the disabled person to perform the essential functions of their job, that employer is required to do so, unless the employer can show that the accommodation is what's called an undue hardship. Just like it's preferable to meet with an attorney to figure out whether or not you may be disabled under the Americans with Disabilities Act, it's also advisable to discuss with an attorney reasonable accommodation and undue hardship issues. Like most employment laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act has a retaliation provision, so that if an employee opposes disability discrimination by, for example, filing an internal complaint with Human Resources or an external complaint with the EEOC, that person is protected from being retaliated against. The ADA's anti-retaliation provision also encompasses protection from retaliation for requesting a reasonable accommodation.